There's a quietness to certain people. The ones who seem to notice things. Who pick up on the shift in someone's voice. Who remember that you mentioned something difficult last week, and gently ask about it now. They're often the ones others seek out. Not because they give advice, necessarily. But because they see you. And if you've ever been that person, you might have noticed something else. A kind of tiredness that doesn't match what you've done. A fatigue that settles in after conversations that seemed, from the outside, perfectly ordinary. There's a pattern here. Something worth sitting with. Most people move through the world collecting just enough information to navigate. But some people collect more. They notice the micro-expression that flashed across your face. The slight change in your posture. The way your laugh sounded just a fraction different than usual. It's not a conscious choice, exactly. It's more like their aperture is set differently. They're taking in a wider range of emotional data, all the time. And data requires processing. While one person hears words in a conversation, another person is also tracking tone, subtext, what's not being said, how the other person is receiving what they're saying, whether this is the right moment to say something or to hold back. It's like having multiple programs running simultaneously in the background. Each one using energy. Each one taking up bandwidth. The thing is, this processing doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like work in the traditional sense. There's no tangible output. No product you can point to and say, this is what I've been doing. But your nervous system knows. Your brain knows. And by the end of the day, you feel it. Here's something curious about emotions, they don't stay contained. When you're in a room with someone who's anxious, you might notice your own breath getting shallower. When you're talking to someone who's grieving, something in your chest tightens too. Scientists have a term for this, emotional contagion. Mirror neurons firing. Your nervous system resonating with someone else's. For some people, this happens at lower volume. Like background music they can tune out if they need to. But for others, the volume is turned up. Way up. They don't just observe that someone is sad. They feel the sadness moving through their own body. Not their own sadness, exactly. But something that takes up space in the same way. It's a kind of permeability. You go to a work meeting. Someone presents with barely concealed nervousness. You sit through a lunch where a friend is quietly struggling. You come home and your partner had a frustrating day. None of these are your experiences. But your system has responded to all of them. Stress hormones released. Muscles tensed. Heart rate elevated. By evening, you're exhausted. And you can't quite explain why. You didn't do anything, really. Except live inside a nervous system that doesn't have strong walls between itself and others. There's a role that forms quietly in relationships. It's never discussed. No one assigns it. But it settles into place anyway. You become the person people tell things to. The one they seek out when something's wrong. The one who remembers that they were anxious about that thing, and follows up about it later. And there's something meaningful in this. Being trusted. Being someone's safe person. It matters. But there's also something that happens over time. An asymmetry develops. You check in on people. You ask how they're doing, and you mean it, and you listen to the real answer. You hold space for their uncertainty, their fear, their frustration. And people come to depend on that. They come to see you as steady. Stable. Someone who has it figured out. Which means they might not think to ask how you're doing. Not in the way you ask them. Not with the same depth of curiosity. Not with the assumption that you might need someone to just listen. The irony is that the better you are at emotional work, the less visible your own needs become. You understand what you're feeling. You can articulate it. You're self-aware. So people assume you're handling it. And you are handling it. But handling something alone is different from being accompanied in it. And that difference accumulates. When you feel something, anger, say, there are different ways it can go. For some people, the feeling arrives and expresses itself without much mediation. They feel angry, they show it, they move on. But for people with high emotional intelligence, there's another layer. The anger arrives. And then, almost simultaneously, a whole process begins. Is this anger proportional? Where is it really coming from? What do I actually need here? How do I express this in a way that doesn't damage the relationship? How is my anger landing for the other person? Should I step back? Should I speak up? Not now? Later? It's like, feeling the feeling, while also managing the feeling, while also managing yourself having the feeling. And here's what's strange, this all happens in real time. While you're still in the conversation. While you're maintaining eye contact. While you're choosing your words carefully. It doesn't feel like effort in the moment. It feels like paying attention. But attention is a limited resource. And this kind of attention, this constant calibration of inner experience and outer expression, it depletes something. There's also this peculiar tension. The more aware you are of your emotions, the more you're tasked with deciding what to do with that awareness. How much to show? How much to filter? How much to adapt? People talk about authenticity. About being yourself. And that sounds simple. But when you're highly attuned to context, to impact, to other people's states, being yourself becomes a constant negotiation. Not a betrayal of self, exactly. But not effortless either. If you recognize yourself in any of this, you might have tried to make sense of the exhaustion. Maybe you've wondered if you're doing something wrong. If you care too much. If you should learn to detach, somehow. But here's another way of seeing it. The tiredness isn't a flaw. It's information. It's your system telling you that you're doing real work. Work that requires energy. Work that has costs. The fact that this work is invisible to others doesn't make it less real. The fact that it's often uncompensated, unacknowledged, doesn't mean it isn't valuable. You're processing multiple streams of emotional information. You're regulating your responses. You're holding space for others. You're maintaining relational harmony, often at your own expense. That's not nothing. And acknowledging that it costs something, that it takes energy, that it creates fatigue, isn't complaining. It's just being honest about the exchange. Maybe the question isn't, why am I so tired? But, what am I spending my energy on, and is that sustainable? Because emotional intelligence is valuable. Noticing is valuable. Caring is valuable. But you are not an infinite resource. And there might be something important in recognizing that. In treating your emotional capacity the way you'd treat any other form of energy. With respect. With limits. With the understanding that it needs to be replenished. Some people need alone time to recover from social interaction. Some people need stillness after absorbing others' emotions. Some people need relationships where they can be held, too. Where they're not always the one doing the holding. These aren't indulgences. They're requirements. The world tells us that emotional intelligence is a strength. And it is. But strength that's never rested becomes depletion. And depletion, over time, becomes something harder to recover from. There's no fix here. No technique that makes the permeability go away. No switch you can flip to stop noticing. And maybe that's not the goal anyway. Maybe the goal is just seeing it clearly. Understanding what's happening. Recognizing that this particular way of moving through the world has costs, and that those costs are real. If you're someone who feels exhausted by things that don't seem exhausting to others, maybe it's because you're doing work they're not doing. Seeing things they're not seeing. Carrying things they're not carrying. And maybe there's something in simply acknowledging that. Not with resentment. Not with martyrdom. But with a quiet understanding that this is what it is. That it's okay to be tired. That being tired doesn't mean you're weak, or broken, or doing it wrong. It just means you're spending your energy. And that energy is finite. And that's worth respecting. Maybe that's enough. My name is James, and this is the Thinking Space. Do well to like and share.